What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all the different movement speed statistics in Warzone. I'm going to try to make them make sense to me as well as you and how they stack. And I'll also give attachment examples and then give attachment recommendations for the Tiger Team versus Bruiser Grip versus Patrol Grip, which is basically the one mobility attachment in a lot of cases you have to pick between. So we're going to go through all of that. As always, if you like the content, please drop a sub, like, and a comment on the video. We're trying to grow the channel and trying to help support the website as well as the YouTube channel. So I'd always appreciate that. But let's start talking about this. So I've kind of broken up the different movement speed statistics here into different groups. So I've got, these are the stats that are listed in game. We have movement speed, ADS movement speed, sprint speed, strafe speed, ADS firing movement speed, and then firing movement speed. So what I've done with that is I've broken each one up into whether or not it has an effect on each different type of movement for both non-ADS movement, so hip fire movement, and ADS movement. So let's start with movement speed. How does movement speed stack with different types of mobility? So I've got direction and type of movement speed and has an effect here. So this is non-ADS. This is when you are hip firing. So does movement speed have an effect on these? Yes. Forward movement speed, backward movement, left and right, aka strafe speed, also has an effect. Sprint speed, it does increase sprint speed. It also does increase tactical sprint speed. It also increases your movement speed while you're firing, and left and right strafe speed while firing as well. So I tried to make this make the most sense as possible, but they've really made this complicated based on how the different things stack. So for regular movement speed, those are the things it affects. So if you have plus 3% movement speed, every single one of these would be plus 3% here in the non-ADS movement column. As far as ADS movement speed, regular movement speed statistic does not stack with that at all in any way. So forward, backward, strafe while firing, and strafe while firing has no effect on any of those as far as regular movement. So ADS movement speed is the other big stat. These are both stats that we had from Modern Warfare. So they were brought over from Modern Warfare into the Cold War integration, whereas Cold War had stats for sprint speed, strafe speed, ADS firing movement speed, and firing movement speed. So these are all the new ones, but we're talking about the first two that have been in the game forever to start with. So as far as non-ADS movement, obviously ADS movement has no effect on any of that. And then it's the same story as the movement speed, only in reverse. So every single type of ADS movement will be increased by ADS movement speed. So plus 3% ADS movement speed will give you 3% on all of these. It'll give you 3% forward, backward, left and right while you're strafing. It'll give you 3% while you're firing and 3% while you're strafing while firing. Next up is sprint speed. So it turns out sprint speed only affects one thing, and that is straight up sprint speed. It does not affect tactical sprint speed. So if you are running patrol grip and doing a ton of slide canceling, it's actually better to run an attachment that increases your movement speed than your sprint speed. And I'll show this in a video here in a second. I timed this out to make sure this was true, and the attachments with movement speed beat the patrol grip when I was slide canceling across an 80-meter distance consistently. So we know that sprint speed only affects base sprint without any tactical sprint or slide canceling or anything. All right, strafe speed. So strafe speed is basically your left and right movement speed. And just as it sounds, strafe speed would affect both left and right strafe when you're not ADS, so when you're hip firing. It also affects your left and right movement while firing, same way it would just with base left and right strafe. And then it also actually scales with ADS movement. So when you're left and right strafing while you're ADS, strafe speed also increases by that percent. So if it was plus 3% strafe speed, while you're moving left and right while hip firing, you move 3% faster. While you're firing, moving left and right, you're 3% faster. And then while you're ADS, moving left and right, 3% faster again. While you're firing while strafing left and right, 3% faster. ADS firing movement, this is pretty much what it sounds like again. So this gets really complicated when you're stacking all these together. So we're going to show examples of that in a second. But ADS firing movement speed basically only increases your movement speed while you're ADS, while you're holding down the trigger. So everything is no in all these columns except your ADS movement while you're firing, moving forward, backward, left, and right. And obviously all directions includes left and right. So that's why firing left and right is included here. And the only reason I split this out into all directions and left and right is because left and right is important for this strafe speed column because it only works in left and right. The last up is firing movement. So firing movement scales with both ADS and hip fire movements. So you can see if you were firing while moving left and right or firing while moving forward and backward while hip firing, it increases that movement speed. Obviously, if it's all directions, it increases left and right as well. Same with ADS movement. So firing movement works for both ADS and non-ADS. So you can see firing movement in all directions increases that while you're ADS, and left and right while you're ADS. So this gets complicated while these attachments are stacking. So let's go look at that, and I'll show you with some real world examples as well as a hypothetical attachment. All right, so on this page, I've got real attachments and then at the end, a hypothetical attachment. Basically, I have the attachment name followed by what it states that it does, and then followed by the percentages of what it states that it does. And then the final results are down in these columns here. So in every direction, every type of mobility, that's where everything's going to be stacked together, and you're going to see how these actually affect your movement. So the Tiger team says it increases movement speed and ADS movement speed. So that's what I have here. It increases movement speed by 3% and ADS movement speed by 3%, whereas the rest of these all do nothing. Sprint speed, tac sprint speed, strafe speed, ADS firing movement speed, firing movement speed. It doesn't mention that it affects any of those, but if you actually look at the final results based on how all these things are stacked and how they work together, you can see for non-ADS movement, you get that same 3% boost forward, backward, left and right for strafing, sprint speed, tac sprint, while firing in all directions, as well as ADS movement, forward, backward, strafing, firing in all directions. So movement speed scales with all of these, and then ADS movement speed scales with all of these. So even though it doesn't say it affects these things, they all stack together. So the Tiger team does affect every single type of movement in the game as far as everything we have defined. As far as Bruiser, so Bruiser says it only affects movement speed. So it's plus 3% movement, and just like the Tiger team, that means that it scales with all hipfire movement or non-ADS movement. Nothing else is stated that it affects it, but it does actually increase your sprint and tac sprint, as well as your strafe and firing movement, because those all scale together. Movement speed scales with all of those. So even though it doesn't say it helps with sprint speed, it doesn't say it helps with strafe speed, it doesn't say it helps with ADS firing or firing, it actually helps with the firing movement speed as well as sprint and tac sprint and strafe speed, just because they all scale together. Next up is the patrol grip. This is the one I've been telling people to use recently because I thought sprint speed was really important because you're sprinting most of the time. Well, now that I know that it doesn't scale with tac sprint, I'm going to change that. I'm going to go back to recommending the Tiger team just because it helps with all types of mobility. Unless you want that hip fire, in which case you can use the Bruiser. But you can see here, all it says is it increases sprint speed by 7%, but nothing else. And that's actually what it does. So it only increases sprint speed. It does not increase your tactical sprint speed, and none of the other mobilities are affected. I also wanted to talk about the 5th and 6th stock because these are, it's like Raider stock, and then the 5th stock depends on the gun, but Spetsnaz PKM stock or one of those other names. So the 5th stock is not the Raider stock, it's the one before that. Basically, you don't get the sprint to fire time bonuses, but you do get a little bit extra ADS movement speed as well as a bonus to your, I don't remember if it's ADS firing or firing compared to the Raider. I think it's firing. I think the Raider stock only has ADS firing. So you'll see how this stacks in this example. So the 5th stock says it increases ADS movement, ADS firing movement, and firing movement. So how that stacks, ADS movement speed is plus 40%, ADS firing movement speed is plus 5%, firing movement speed plus 5%. So looking at the non-ADS results for hipfire, so this is hipfire results, while you're firing the gun, in all directions, you're going to move 5% faster. That's because of the 5% movement speed while firing bonus. So that is hipfire, moving in any direction. You get 5% better movement speed while you're holding down the trigger. And then as far as ADS movement, this is where it gets more complicated. So we have plus 40% base ADS movement. So all of them get plus 40%. And then all of these scale multiplicatively. So while you're firing, moving in all directions, you get an extra plus 5 or an extra multiple of 5%. So 40% times 5%. And then on top of that, you get an extra 5% again from the firing movement speed, because firing movement speed scales, if you remember from the beginning, with both non-ADS and ADS. So it scales on top of this ADS firing movement. So we get plus 40% times plus 5% times plus 5% for your firing ADS movement speed while you're holding the trigger down, moving in all directions. You end up getting plus 54% ADS movement speed while you're holding the trigger down with the 5th stock for this example. These were just picked numbers. I didn't pick a specific gun because for different types of guns like SMGs, ARs, and LMGs, you get different numbers for these, how they actually are measured. So ADS movement speed, firing movement speed, and things like that are all different based on the type of gun. But this was just one example here. So obviously with this stacking, things can get pretty complicated. So let's talk about the Raider stock real fast, the 6th stock, the last stock. Again, this was just a singular example I pulled out. You get plus 10% ADS movement speed and plus 5% ADS firing movement speed. So this one's a lot simpler because it doesn't have firing movement speed included. So everything in the non-ADS movement is just no effect because this only affects your ADS movement. You get that plus 10% base across the board for the ADS movement speed. And then while you're firing in all directions, you get that extra 5%. So that leads to 16% increase in your ADS movement while you're holding the trigger down versus only a 10% when you're not holding the trigger down. Last up, I built a hypothetical attachment with every type of movement speed in the game just so we could see how all these stack together. Basically, this would be like you added a bunch of different attachments that did different things like movement speed, ADS movement speed, sprint speed, strafe speed, and then obviously the firing movement speeds as well. So this hypothetical attachment, I can delete this because we're not going to talk about that, but it decreases your movement speed, base movement speed by 5%, increases your ADS movement speed by 40%, increases your sprint speed by 8%. It doesn't say anything about Tac Sprint because they never mentioned Tac Sprint. That's not a stat that's actually listed in game. Strafe speed plus 3%, ADS firing movement speed 5%, firing movement speed 5%. So how does this all stack? So base ADS or base movement speed is minus 5%. So every single type of movement speed to start with has this minus 5%. I forgot to put it in this column, so I'll add it real quick. Minus 5% times plus 5%, and then minus 5% times plus 5%. All right, so I added it there. I'll have to redo these calculations as well. So the base movement speed for this hypothetical attachment, or you can think of this like stacking a bunch of different mobility attachments. Forward, backward would be just minus 5%, but left and right strafe speed, because we have the strafe speed stat here, is going to be that minus 5% for the base times the plus 3% for the strafe, which ends in a net of minus 2.2%. Sprint speed is minus 5% base because of the minus 5% base movement, and then times the 8% increase. So that leads to a plus 2.6% net increase in sprint speed. Again, sprint speed does not affect your tactical sprint. So tactical sprint is still just minus 5% because of the base movement speed change. And while firing, we have to stack the base movement speed with the plus 5% firing movement speed. I already did have the minus 5% in there. Is at the end though. Okay, so we'll just take that back out. So this should be plus 5%, the 80 or the firing movement speed plus 5% times minus 5% for the base movement. I just have it kind of out of order there. But that results in basically a net zero change, just a little bit slower movement speed while you're firing. And then while firing left and right is going to be, because we have a strafe speed, this scales everywhere. So we have minus 5% from the base movement, plus 5% from the firing movement speed, and then plus 3% from the strafe speed. So this results in a plus 8%, or I got to redo that actually. So that's 1.95 times 1.05 times 1.03. That results in a 2.7% increase, not an 8% increase, because I forgot the base at the start. So we'll change that to 2.7. And you can see this was even confusing me as I was going through it because there's just so much stuff to consider here. All right, on to ADS movement. We have that plus 40% base ADS movement. So that's every direction while strafing, while firing, everything. So that's in all of these, plus 40%. Forward, backward is only plus 40%. Then left and right is the 40% plus the extra 3% from the strafe speed. So you multiply those together, you get 44% net change in your left and right ADS strafe speed. While firing forward and backward is just the 40% plus the extra 5% from your ADS firing movement speed, and then the extra 5% from your firing movement speed, because like I said, these two actually both affect your ADS firing movement speed. So firing movement speed does both non-ADS and ADS. So you get to add an extra 5% there, which leads to a 54% increase in firing movement speed, forward and backward. Then if you add in just looking at strafe speed, left to right, we have an extra 3%. So it's the exact same thing as forward and backward, but you add in another 3%. At the end there, times 3%, you get 159%. So 59% increase. And you can see this is really confusing how this all stacks. I don't even think this is correct on the website. At this point, we are working on adding all these. I think I have all of the strafe speeds as well as all of the firing movement speeds added, but just not programmed into display yet. But it's pretty complicated. I wanted to make this video to try to clarify all of this for you. And I'm just going to cap this off by showing you guys the actual video of me running and timing the different attachments to make sure that sprint speed does not scale with tactical sprint. All right, so what I did to test the different attachments for sprint speed and tactical sprint speed and slide canceling is I ran 80 meters, same path every time, basically one without any attachment, one with Tiger Team, one with Bruiser, one with Patrol Grip, and I just timed it. So that's what this is. Obviously, there's some inconsistency with how long my slide cancels were and things like that, but I tried to kind of smooth all that out by running a very long distance. So I ran 80 meters, and you'll see the results here in a second. So to run 80 meters, the Bruiser Grip took 10:51, Tiger Team took 11, no attachments 11:14, and then the Patrol Grip is 11:14 as well. So this is how I know that It's not scaling with Tactical Sprint because the only difference here was that I was tac sprinting the entire time. Anytime I was moving, when I wasn't sliding, I was tac sprinting. So that means that the Tiger and Bruiser are scaling. They should be about the same. Obviously, there's some variance in these tests because, like I said, we don't know exactly how perfectly my timings of my slide cancels were and perfect timings of my total amount of tac sprint time and things like that. But the results were good enough that we know the Patrol Grip's not affecting tac sprint, and the Tiger team and Bruiser both are. So that's just something important to know. If you're someone that slide cancels a lot, you should probably be using the Tiger team. Or if you want a little hip fire, use the Bruiser. But Patrol Grip, if you're just sprinting around the map, you just like to get around the map quickly without slide canceling, still the best choice. But overall, I think Tiger Team's a better choice for most people that are slide canceling. All right, guys, confusing topic. I'm going to try to put some graphics on the website for this. Try to make it as clean as I can sometime in the future. But again, we have a million things to work on all the time, so I'm not sure when I will get that done. We're still working on premium features. That's about all I had to say. Confusing topic. I hope it made some sense to you. But I will see you guys on the next video, which will hopefully be out tomorrow. But I might take a couple days off here to try to get back into programming and get these premium features done. But appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.